Everything you try to perfect takes you further from perfection, because perfection is the naturalness that emerges when you stop trying to force it. Now, this might sound like philosophical wordplay at first, but I want you to consider something. Have you ever noticed that your most beautiful moments, your most genuine expressions, your deepest connections with others, they all happened when you weren't trying to make them perfect? They emerged precisely when you dropped your guard, when you stopped managing the outcome, when you simply allowed what was natural to unfold. Think about laughter, real laughter. You cannot manufacture it, you cannot plan it, you cannot perfect it. It bubbles up from some mysterious place within you, completely spontaneous, completely authentic. And the moment you try to control it, to make it more perfect, to perform it, it dies. It becomes artificial, forced, uncomfortable. Have you ever been to a comedy show where the comedian was trying too hard? Where every joke felt calculated, every timing rehearsed to the point of mechanical precision. The technique might be flawless, but something essential is missing. Compare that to those moments when someone makes you laugh without even trying, when humor emerges naturally from the situation, unplanned and unrehearsed. That's when laughter becomes magic. This is the fundamental paradox of human existence. The things we value most deeply cannot be achieved through effort. Love cannot be forced. Joy cannot be manufactured. Peace cannot be grasped. Beauty cannot be constructed. And perfection cannot be perfected. Yet we spend our entire lives trying. We approach love like a project to be managed. We treat joy like a goal to be achieved. We pursue peace like a destination to be reached. We chase beauty like a trophy to be won. And we hunt perfection like prey to be captured. But here's what nobody tells you about this hunt. The hunter becomes the hunted. The one seeking perfection becomes imprisoned by the very thing they're chasing. They become so focused on the ideal that they lose touch with the real. So obsessed with how things should be that they cannot see how things actually are. I once watched a master calligrapher at work. For hours I observed as he prepared his ink, arranged his brushes, positioned his paper. Everything had to be just right. The lighting, the angle, the temperature of the room. And when he finally began to write, each stroke was labored, careful, controlled. The characters were technically flawless, but they had no life in them. They were perfect and perfectly dead. Then, near the end of our session, he received a phone call. Some urgent matter that required his attention. As he spoke, almost absent-mindedly, he picked up his brush and began making marks on a piece of scrap paper. Not thinking, not planning, not trying to create anything perfect, just moving the brush naturally while his mind was elsewhere. And those marks, they were alive. They danced, they breathed. They had a quality that all his careful, perfect characters lacked. When he hung up the phone and saw what he had done, he stared at the paper for a long moment. Then he looked at me and smiled. "The hand knows what the mind forgets," he said. What struck me most about that moment was how his entire demeanor had changed. During his careful, perfect writing, his face was tense, his shoulders rigid, his breathing shallow. But when he was writing, unconsciously, naturally, his whole being was relaxed. The perfection he had been struggling to achieve through effort had emerged effortlessly the moment he stopped trying to create it. This is the secret that perfectionism tries to hide from you. Your natural state is already perfect. Not perfect in the sense of flawless, but perfect in the sense of complete, whole, authentically itself. A tree doesn't try to be a perfect tree. It simply grows according to its nature. A bird doesn't practice being a perfect bird. It simply flies. A flower doesn't struggle to bloom perfectly. It simply opens when the time is right. But somewhere along the way, we humans got confused. We started believing that we needed to improve ourselves, to fix ourselves, to perfect ourselves. We began treating our natural state as a rough draft that needed editing rather than a masterpiece that needed only to be recognized. Now, let me be clear about something. I'm not suggesting that effort is meaningless or that skill doesn't matter. The master calligrapher had spent decades developing his technique. The difference was that in those spontaneous moments, he wasn't using his technique to control the outcome. He was allowing his technique to serve expression rather than demanding that expression serve technique. This is what I call the paradox of mastery. True mastery appears when you've practiced so thoroughly that you can forget about practicing. When technique becomes so integrated that it operates beneath conscious thought. When skill becomes so natural that it doesn't interfere with spontaneity. Watch a truly great musician perform. They know their instrument inside and out. They've practiced scales thousands of times. They understand theory and composition. But when they're playing their best, they're not thinking about any of that. They've transcended technique to touch something beyond skill. They've become so proficient that they can be imperfect, so prepared that they can be spontaneous, so controlled that they can let go. This is the goal that perfectionism never reaches. Perfectionism keeps you trapped in the technique, forever polishing, forever adjusting, forever trying to get it just right. But just right is a moving target that always stays one step ahead of your efforts. I remember a student who came to me frustrated with her meditation practice. I can't get it right, she said. My mind keeps wandering. I keep having thoughts. I'm not achieving the perfect state of meditation. I asked her, what would a perfect meditation look like? She described a state of complete mental stillness, absolute peace, no thoughts whatsoever, a condition of pure consciousness untouched by any mental movement. And how long have you been trying to achieve this? I asked. 3 years, she replied. And in these 3 years, have you become more or less frustrated with your practice? More frustrated, she admitted. And this frustration, where does it come from? From not being able to meditate properly. But you are meditating properly, I told her. You're just not meditating perfectly. And that's exactly how meditation is supposed to work. She looked puzzled. But all the books say I should achieve a state of no mind, of pure emptiness. And who is it that would achieve this state? I asked. Who is it that would be empty? She paused, considering. I would be. But if you achieved perfect emptiness, where would you be? If there were truly no mind, who would know it? This question stopped her completely. She had been trying to use her mind to escape her mind, to use thinking to stop thinking. She had been fighting fire with fire and wondering why everything kept burning. You see, she had confused meditation with a performance to be perfected rather than a natural state to be recognized. She was trying to manufacture peace instead of noticing the peace that was already there beneath all her efforts to create it. The mind wanders. That's what minds do. The perfection of meditation isn't the absence of wandering, it's the gentle return to awareness when you notice you've wandered. Not the prevention of thoughts, but the space that observes thoughts. Not the achievement of stillness, but the recognition that you are the stillness in which all movement occurs. This understanding changes everything. Instead of trying to perfect your meditation, you begin to recognize the perfection that's already present in your imperfect practice. Instead of fighting your wandering mind, you appreciate its natural movement. Instead of seeking a state you don't have, you discover the awareness you've never lost. But this principle extends far beyond meditation. It applies to everything you do, everything you are, everything you're trying to become. Think about your relationships. How much energy do you spend trying to be the perfect partner, the perfect friend, the perfect parent? How often do you filter your words, manage your image, control your responses to create the ideal version of yourself? And what happens to intimacy when you're performing perfection? Real connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is inherently imperfect. It's messy, unpredictable, sometimes uncomfortable. The moments when people feel most loved by you are rarely the moments when you're at your most polished. They're the moments when you're tired and your guard is down, when you say something unexpectedly honest, when you laugh at the wrong time, when you admit you don't know something, when you show them the parts of yourself you usually try to hide. These imperfect moments create perfect connection because they're real. I think of a couple I once knew who had been married for 40 years. When I asked them the secret to their lasting love, the husband said, "We stopped trying to impress each other about 15 years ago." The wife laughed and added, "That's when we finally fell in love with who we actually were, not who we thought we should be." Their relationship didn't become perfect when they stopped hiding their flaws. It became authentic. And authenticity, it turns out, is far more attractive than perfection could ever be. Perfect people are impossible to love, not because they're flawless, but because they're not really there. They've disappeared behind their performance, leaving only a carefully constructed image for others to relate to. And you cannot love an image. You can admire it, you can be impressed by it, you can even be intimidated by it. But you cannot truly connect with it because there's no one home behind the perfection. This is why perfectionism is so isolating. The more perfect you try to be, the more alone you become. Not because others reject you, but because you've rejected the parts of yourself that are actually lovable. You've decided that your natural, imperfect human self isn't good enough, so you've hidden it away and presented a substitute instead. But here's the beautiful irony. The flaws you're trying to hide are often the very qualities that make you endearing to others. Your nervous laugh, your tendency to ramble when excited, your inability to keep plants alive, your terrible sense of direction, your habit of making bad puns. These aren't bugs in your system that need to be fixed. They're features that make you uniquely you. I once knew a woman who was convinced she needed to lose weight before she could be attractive. She spent years dieting, exercising obsessively, measuring herself against impossible standards. She was waiting to be perfect before she would allow herself to be seen, to be loved, to truly live. Then one day she was rushing to catch a train, late for an important meeting. She was sweaty, disheveled, completely unprepared to meet anyone. And on that train, looking exactly as she never wanted to be seen, she met the person who would become her partner for life. Later, when she asked what had attracted him to her, he said, "You looked so alive, so real. Everyone else on that train looked like they were pretending to be somewhere else, but you were completely present, completely yourself." What's remarkable is that this experience completely transformed how she saw herself. For years, she had believed her worth was tied to how perfectly she could present herself to the world. But in that moment of complete unguardedness, she discovered something profound. She was most attractive when she wasn't trying to be attractive at all. The very qualities she had been trying to hide, her naturalness, her spontaneity, her humanity, were what drew genuine love into her life. She had spent years trying to perfect her appearance, and it was precisely when she stopped trying that she became irresistible. This is the cosmic joke of perfectionism. It promises to make you more attractive, more successful, more lovable, more fulfilled, but it delivers exactly the opposite. It makes you less attractive because you're not really there, less successful because you're too afraid to risk failure, less lovable because you've hidden your true self, less fulfilled because you're always reaching for something just beyond your grasp. Perfectionism is like trying to catch your own shadow. The harder you chase it, the faster it runs away from you. The more desperately you grasp for it, the more it eludes you. But the moment you stop chasing and simply stand still, you realize it was always right there with you. Your perfect self isn't something you become. It's something you already are, beneath all the trying, beneath all the effort, beneath all the improvement projects you've imposed on yourself. But recognizing this requires a fundamental shift in how you understand perfection itself. We've been taught to think of perfection as flawlessness, as the absence of any defects or mistakes. But this is a very limited understanding. True perfection is completeness. It's the recognition that everything belongs, that nothing is out of place, that even the seeming imperfections serve a perfect purpose. A circle isn't perfect because it has no irregularities in its curve. A circle is perfect because every point on its circumference is exactly where it needs to be to create the whole. Consider a jazz performance. To someone obsessed with classical precision, jazz might seem imperfect, full of bent notes, unexpected rhythms, apparent mistakes. But these imperfections are what give jazz its soul, its life, its perfect expression of spontaneous creativity. The wrong note played with conviction becomes the right note. The unexpected pause creates perfect tension. The seeming chaos resolves into perfect order. In the same way, you are perfect not because you have no flaws, but because every aspect of you, including your flaws, contributes to the complete expression of who you are. Your sensitivity, which you might consider a weakness, might be exactly what allows you to understand others deeply. Your impatience, which you try to overcome, might be the driving force behind your ability to create change. Your tendency to worry might be connected to your capacity for careful attention. What you call imperfections might actually be the very qualities that make you perfectly suited for your unique purpose in this world. This doesn't mean you stop growing, learning, or developing. It means you approach growth from a place of already being whole rather than from a place of being broken. It means you evolve not because there's something wrong with you that needs fixing, but because evolution is your natural state. A plant doesn't grow because it's imperfect as a seed. It grows because growth is its inherent nature. An acorn doesn't struggle to become an oak tree because there's something wrong with being an acorn. It becomes an oak tree because that's what acorns naturally do when given the right conditions. Watch how nature perfects itself without trying. The acorn doesn't study oak tree manuals or attend seminars on how to be a better tree. It doesn't compare itself to other acorns or worry about whether it's growing fast enough. It simply receives what it needs, sunlight, water, soil, and responds according to its nature. The perfection happens naturally, organically, without force or self-improvement programs. In the same way, your development as a human being isn't a project to perfect yourself. It's the natural unfolding of your inherent potential. You're not a broken thing that needs repair. You're a seed that's naturally growing into what you've always had the potential to become. But perfectionism interrupts this natural process. It's like digging up the seed every day to check if it's growing properly, then replanting it in different soil because the growth isn't happening fast enough or in exactly the right way. All this interference actually prevents the natural unfolding that would happen on its own. When you let go of trying to perfect yourself, you create space for organic growth. When you stop forcing yourself to be different, you allow yourself to naturally become who you already are beneath all the trying. This is perhaps the deepest teaching about perfection. It's not about addition. It's about subtraction. It's not about becoming more. It's about revealing what's already there by removing what's not essential. Michelangelo said that he didn't create David by adding marble, but by removing everything that wasn't David. The statue was already there, complete and perfect, hidden within the raw stone. The art was in revealing it, not in creating it. In the same way, your perfect self is already there, hidden beneath layers of conditioning, expectations, fears, and effort. The art of living isn't about constructing a perfect life, but about removing everything that obscures the life that's already perfectly unfolding. When you stop trying to perfect your meditation and simply sit, perfect awareness reveals itself. When you stop trying to perfect your relationships and simply love, perfect connection emerges. When you stop trying to perfect your work and simply engage with what's in front of you, perfect action arises naturally. This is why the ancient teachings always point toward letting go rather than adding on. Not because effort is bad or striving is wrong, but because your natural state is already what you're seeking. The effort to perfect it only obscures what's already perfect. So here's the invitation. What would happen if you stopped trying to improve yourself for just one day? What would it feel like to approach your life from the assumption that you're already complete, already whole, already enough exactly as you are? Not as an excuse for complacency, but as a foundation for authentic growth. Not as a reason to stop learning, but as a recognition that learning happens most naturally when it comes from joy rather than inadequacy. Not as permission to be careless, but as freedom to care from a place of wholeness rather than lack. Try this experiment. For one day, approach everything you do as if you're already perfect at it. Not perfect in the sense that you can't improve, but perfect in the sense that you're exactly where you need to be in this moment. See what happens when you write without trying to write perfectly, when you speak without trying to say the perfect thing, when you work without trying to produce the perfect result. Start small. Make your morning coffee without trying to make it perfectly. Simply make it. Notice how different it feels when you're not evaluating every step, not second-guessing every decision. Then carry this approach into your conversations. Speak without editing yourself. Respond without calculating the perfect response. See how much more natural and flowing your interactions become when you're not performing perfection. Notice how it feels in your body when you're not straining toward perfection. Notice how much energy becomes available when you're not using it to constantly monitor and adjust your performance. Notice how much more present you become when you're not thinking about how to do better. And then, from this place of already being enough, see what naturally wants to emerge. See what creativity arises when it's not being forced. See what love flows when it's not being manufactured. See what wisdom appears when you stop trying to be wise. This is the paradox that perfectionism can never solve. The more perfectly you try to live, the less perfect your life becomes. But the more you allow your life to be naturally what it is, the more perfectly it expresses itself. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not a rough draft that needs editing. You are not a work in progress that will only be valuable when it's completed. You are a complete expression of life, perfect in your very imperfection, whole in your apparent brokenness, beautiful in your absolute humanity. The pursuit of perfection takes you away from this recognition, but the moment you stop pursuing and simply recognize, you discover that what you were seeking was never absent. It was simply hidden beneath all the effort to find it. Everything you try to perfect takes you further from perfection, because perfection isn't a destination you reach. It's the ground you're already standing on, waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice where you've always been.